All right, welcome back for another edition of the Sports Den podcast. I am the sports editor, Will Weber. I'm joined, as always, by James Barron. And unfortunately, we do not have a guest after last week's scintillating appearance
Oh, I
from the
know.
Pecos League commissioner, president, Andrew Dunn, which went so well. It was one of those interviews where I sat back and thought, in my 28 years of sports journalism, that's definitely one of the more memorable flameouts I've ever had. So,
Just when you think you've seen it all, man. So you leave it to Andrew Dunn to just top everybody else.
I haven't heard from him since, which is surprising. He's probably back in his man cave. The thing is, I really wanted to ask him about his house in Houston because one of the former Fuego managers was telling me during the pandemic, they all went. They remember they had a 4-team season,
That's
abbreviated
right, in
season in
Houston.
Houston.
Yeah.
And the Fuego manager at the time was one of the people who was helping out. He was doing play-by-play for them, and he's like, "You should see this guy's house. It's a big place, but it is filled wall to wall with baseball stuff, like not cool merchandise, but boxes of balls, used bats, just like thrown up against the wall, just like leaning in corners." He said, "You should see this place. It's unbelievable. It's like a giant storage shed for
I was gonna say,
baseball."
is he like the ultimate baseball hoarder?
Oh, he must be. Well, after Von Encinius told us last week, they go through what 4 dozen baseballs a game. I can't
Game.
even
Oh my
imagine how many
gosh, man.
baseballs that takes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's insane. And I imagine, that's just batting practice too, right?
yeah. Well, questions lost to the ether that we'll never get since he was on an airplane and got told to shut it down. So
Did he
really
get
just a
told?
bummer.
Did he get told to shut it down, or did his internet just basically said, "Yeah, we're done with you"?
Yeah, just both. I think maybe the airline stewardess told him to mind his own business. So,
Yeah, I think the internet gods are trying to do him a favor by not having him talk anymore.
right. Well, you and I have both been out to the Fuego games. They played, I think, 10 games as of the recording of this. I think
Eight,
they're is that what it is? Yeah, they won
eight.
2 games.
Yeah,
And I think the knee jerk reaction is to throw dirt on the Fuego again. I think they were 3-5, 3-6, something like that. But you look at their schedule; they've played Tucson, which is arguably the best team in the league. So they're hanging in there. Cannot wait to see that promised 30-foot fence, though, which I understand, James, you're working on that story too. I know
yes, I
the,
am.
the turquoise tower.
That's right. What are we going to call it? The turquoise wall, the turquoise monster, the
I think we need to see what color it is first because I've never seen turquoise netting. So let's just hold off on
yeah.
that.
I heard it's not exactly going to be turquoise. Basically, it's as is all things Pecos League. It's just a thing that was laying around, and Andrew said, "Oh, hey, we can use that."
They're going to hang it up. They're going to find out there's holes all through it too. So there'll be
Yeah,
a
that's what they're worried about.
ground
One
rule
thing.
triple. You hit it off the netting, it'll just disappear through the netting.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that. I guess I might be teasing it a little bit here for the story that'll be coming out on Thursday. But um, apparently, because of where the netting is going to be set, it's going to be outside the wall. Anything that hits the net is going to be a ground rule double, no matter what.
Oh yeah, because the ball would slide back under behind the fence then.
Well, it's just that if it was inside the field of play, you could play it off the wall, but because it's considered outside the parameters of the field, it's considered, I guess, I don't know, just an obstruction or something. And so, part of their rules are just like it's a ground rule double if it hits that wall.
Yeah, I think the idea is that it's going to keep scoring down at Fuego games, which keeping the score down means keeping it in the low double digits. I would think.
Yeah,
They had a
yeah.
game the other
So
night. It was 25-17. Lasted 4.5 hours, so it was one of those games. But I think maybe you can keep some home runs in the park, but it's sure not going to keep the scoring down. And no matter how big that wall is, you can never fix the pitching if you're walking 10 or 12 guys a game like they usually do. No amount of walls or infield tarps or different baseballs are going to fix the pitching if you can't find the strike zone.
well, thanks, Will. This guy's trying, the new
Right?
manager's trying to get pitchers, and here you are giving him a ringing endorsement for
You
uh
know,
for coming to Santa
yeah.
Fe.
Well, I like how the best pitching performance they got was the guy from Volcano Vista, the local guy. They had the professional player who'd pitched in a couple years of Double A, and his first night out, he couldn't find the strike zone because,
Yeah.
like you and I saw, he's out there digging trenches on the mound with his spikes because that mound is made out of dirt. It's not made out of clay. So after a few warm up tosses, your plant foot is landing in a pit of about 3 inches
basically,
deep
yeah.
of sand, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And you could put Sandy Koufax on that mountain. He's gonna have a hard time finding the strike zone if his plant foot is like you're landing in kitty litter every single time. But
Yeah.
that's
Again, a ringing endorsement for pitching in Santa Fe there.
right.
If it's
I
not the fence, it's the pitching mound. If it's not the pitching mound, it's the divots in the infield,
yeah, I'm gonna apply to become the chief recruiter for the Fuego. Man, I'll get some good guys out there.
Yeah, I know, man. You'll scare away 16-year-olds, dude.
Yeah, yeah. So the Fuego season is up and running. And look, regardless how they do, it's always kind of fun to go out to a game and see him play. It's you're not really there you want to see him and you want to see him do well, but it's more about the experience. Like going to an Isotopes game, you don't really care if they win or
Who
lose.
wins?
You just
But
want to have a good time. It's
yeah,
cheap.
yeah, you want to enjoy the food, you want to enjoy the atmosphere, and then hopefully you want to get out of there before 10.
Before and hopefully your car doesn't get damaged in the parking lot from a foul
Oh,
ball.
that too. That too. You don't. Yeah. Or if you've already got a cracked windshield, you're probably hoping that you get hit, so that way you can just use you can just use your deductible on your insurance to get it
Right.
all fixed.
Well, the big news last week, of course, it was nice for me because I took most of last week off to do yard work.
Yeah, I know. This is about the only thing you did last week.
I didn't do anything. It was weird to dial out for sports. I didn't really pay attention to anything or anyone. I just did yard work for 4 or 5 days in a row, and I have sunburn to prove it. Yeah, my neck is peeling badly, which doesn't make my wife happy. But of course, the big news last week was the House versus the NCAA settlement,
Yes.
which requires schools now to pay athletes, college athletes, from the revenue shares that they will get. Of course, it's got a huge impact on UNM, as opposed to like Ohio State or Alabama. These big schools, they can afford the payouts, absorb the losses. UNM just doesn't have quite the
No,
overhead to do
they
that.
do not. And the worst part on top of all of that is it's kind of a double whammy. I mean, now you're having to figure out ways of trying to generate revenue in order to pay your athletes, but then you're also losing money from the NCAA because since UNM and NMSU decided to join in on the settlement, um, part of the payout will come out of their the money that the NCAA distributes for its TV rights deals for football and especially for basketball. So the estimate is that UNM will lose about $500,000 per year for the next 10 years out of that disbursement. That'll
Yeah.
go toward paying off the settlement.
Yeah, and then when you're on top of all that, you're still trying to raise money to pay for scholarships, which goes to the Lobo Club. You're still trying to raise money for NIL, which the
Mhm.
future of NIL is still very much in play. You're just not really sure what's going to happen with that. And then look, UNM just doesn't. It's not like they're pinching pennies. Them in New Mexico
They are.
State. You're talking about an annual budget for UNM in the neighborhood of $40 million, and we're losing $500,000. $500,000 goes a long way. It can build you a press box at the softball
Mhm.
complex. It can refinish the track. It can resod the soccer field. It can do a lot of stuff. So that's a
No,
lot of money.
it certainly can, and you can kind of see why they were working so hard with the legislature this year in order to increase the amount of money the athletic department gets from state government for that. They already had to raise student fees in order to help address that issue as well. But I mean, there's only so many times you can go to that well,
Hmm.
uh, and that's going to be that's going to be their issue. Is just how do you figure out new ways of trying to generate revenue. And there's only finite amount of money that you can really squeeze out of the city and out of the community and everything, unless Jeff Bezos decides all of a sudden he's feeling that Albuquerque tug to his heartstrings. We're not getting anybody that's going to drop like 25 or $50 million onto this university.
Yeah, and then you look at everyone talks about how Albuquerque, the greater metropolitan area, has close to 1 million residents, but the the difference between Albuquerque and another city out of state that might have the same amount of people is usually outside that metropolitan area. There's just more communities that you never really actually leave the sense of surrounding. Where here in Albuquerque, everything is just within a 20-mile radius, or if you include Santa
Yeah,
Fe.
and then you get a lot of dirt.
Yeah, a lot of dirt, and then there's nothing. And most really the majority of money in the state of New Mexico comes from this area that includes Santa Fe and Albuquerque and Los Lunas, Rio Rancho, and Belen. And outside of that, there's nothing. And then on top of that, the Mountain West just splintered apart officially a couple of weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago, where the 5 schools that are leaving officially announced that they were going to the Pac-12. And then you have that media rights deal that the Mountain West is still trying to finalize. They're bracing for impact. They either might lose a little bit of money, they might get a little bit more money, or it could stay the same. Either way, you're not pushing the needle much either way. And oh, by the way, everything is getting more expensive. I don't know if you noticed that, but every time you go to
Yeah.
travel, every time you go to buy something, everything is more expensive. And if you're not bringing in more revenue, it's just really putting a strain on you. And it's a huge drag that the Mountain West, which had positioned itself as the most powerful conference west of the Mississippi, decided to cut itself in half. And now you have 2 conferences, and they're just staring at each other, trying to feed off the same plate. It's just, it's an unfortunate situation. And New Mexico State's even in a worse spot because their conference is even weaker, with a weaker revenue stream. So it just, if you're a Lobo fan, if you're an Aggie fan, I think now is the time to kind of panic a little bit and say, what does the future hold? What does the next 5 or 10, 12, 20 years hold for us?
Well, I think if there's something that maybe they want to hang their hat on is perhaps expanding the NCAA tournament, because when you look at what's going to happen with the Mountain West, and you're talking about, really the top tier of the Mountain West is moving over to the Pac-12, and what that means is, there aren't, you're not going to be that 3 or 4 or even 5 bid league team or 5 team bid league that you were, even just a couple of years ago. You'll be lucky if you get 1, maybe 2 on in a good year, 3 if you're having a great if you're having a great one. But a lot of those schools rely on, the credits that you get out of going to the NCAA tournament. And if you don't have a team like, for example, San Diego State has really carried the conference from the basketball standpoint for the last really decade, and because they've been the only team to get to the Sweet 16. If you don't have that one team that's sitting there kind of being the benchmark for the conference, you're generally going to be losing out on probably a couple $1 million easily out of that.
Yeah, well, and UNM was in position to become the new team
Yeah.
for the Mountain West, and it's unfortunate for them because they went to 2 straight tournaments. They won the Mountain West championship last year, and now they are literally an expansion team. And I can promise you, whenever all the people sit down and they try to put pen to paper to figure out how good the Lobo basketball team is going to be, no one has any clue, and that includes the head
Yeah.
coach. No one knows what to expect. We don't even know who the point guard's going to be. We don't know who's going to score the points, who the bench
Oh, we don't
warmers
even
are.
know who's going to be a starter, much less the
Yeah,
starting 5, right?
yeah. We don't know the coach's style. We don't know if they're going to be able to handle it. We don't even know if the fans are going to accept this team because when after the demise of the Steve Alford era and the Craig Neal era, everything kind of went down a slide for the better part of a decade. And I don't know if they're heading that way, but it's just the culture of college athletics is just it's not doing any favors to schools like UNM. And then look, you're in a conference that still has UNLV and Air Force, but I can promise you, as soon as the Big 12 comes calling, and I think eventually it does come calling, UNLV is going to say see ya and leave. And then all of a sudden there goes one of your bell cows for the Mountain West, and who you stuck with? UC Davis, Grand Canyon,
Yeah.
Wyoming, New
Yeah.
Mexico,
All of a
Utah.
sudden, NMSU looks quite
Yeah,
enticing when you don't have anything else, much else to kind of
yeah,
attract yourself to. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, and I'm not even sure if it's just the Big 12. I mean, I think if the Pac-12, with the group that they have there, they could easily become that power conference west of the Mississippi that we're all talking about, or at least the second best. Because I mean, let's be honest, half of the Big 12 does reside west of the Mississippi. So the
yeah,
second best conference, that side will probably end up being the Pac-12, and all of a sudden UNLV probably looks at it like, hey, we might get a little bit more, but a little bit more is better than not much.
yeah. Well, and I just you always come back to this when you talk about college athletics, but it's all about football. And
Yeah.
I saw a thing the other day where in the history of the Associated Press poll, UNM has never been ranked. Not in 93 years since they've ever
Yeah.
done any tabulation for top 20, top 25, top 10. For a few years, it was top 10. They have never once been ranked. And that's the longest streak of anyone that's currently in the FBI. It's just,
And that's not doesn't that just like just rub you the wrong way, especially if you're
yeah,
a Lobo grad. NMSU has been ranked in the top 25 before
yeah.
UNM has been.
Yeah, you'd think even during that 1982 season when they went 10-1 and
And
did not get
one,
a bowl
yeah,
bid, they would have accidentally tripped. I know they were in the UPI top 25 for just right at the end of the season, but they were never in
yeah,
the Associated Press Bowl,
yeah, yeah.
which
And I
tells
think
you,
even I think the '97 team an appearance in the coaches poll, but never the
yeah,
writers.
yeah, they were 9-2 at the end of the regular season. Then they lost in the WAC championship game to Colorado State, and then they lost in the Inside.com Bowl to Arizona. And of
Arizona, yeah,
course, then Franchione left, and then the whole thing went right in the
went
toilet
back to
afterwards. It's like the sustainability only lasts as long as the people sitting at the top, and when the top people leave, it makes you wonder, like, all right, wow, I wonder how hard they push the reset button because it might take a long time to get back there.
yeah, yeah,
Decades maybe. But
yeah.
look, everything you hear about Jason Eck is he's the next up and comer. Like I know Jason Eck is not exactly spring chicken, but everything you read about the guy is promising. Yet, and we even put this in our notes that came out on Monday. UNM was picked last in the ESPN metrics. I think they projected him to win 2.2 games this year, which makes you wonder where the 2.2 wins are going to come from. They play Idaho State. They play the Aggies. Maybe you get those two. Utah State, for even though Bronco Mendenhall there is there, Utah
Oh,
State
he'll
is
turn that thing around. He'll turn it
yeah,
around. So
yeah. But right now the getting is probably good right now to get Utah State because Utah State's got to come here, and I think it's October, and so maybe there's 3 wins right there. But
maybe.
yeek, yeah, it's it's rough. But when you look at the grand scope of UNM athletics, there's some money there. Like I know they've acquired enough money to put a press box in finally at the baseball field, which they have to. And look, we're entering the College World Series later this week. And you look at a team like Murray State, which plays in a facility that has 2 like little league dugouts and it has seating for 800 people. And the
Yeah,
coach,
and they made it to the College World
yeah,
Series.
the coach mows the grass himself. If it makes you wonder if they can do it, why can't they do it here? But then you look at UNM situation there. What kind of I mean, pick the lowest worst basketball conference that you can think of at Division One, like maybe the I don't know where the Northeast Colonial Athletic, whatever it might be. That's kind of what the Mountain West is for baseball. They're like I think they were 19th in RPI this year for baseball. So it's like,
And it's not going
golly,
to get any better when you lose teams like Fresno State and San Diego State. I mean,
right?
those are kind of your stronger teams from a baseball standpoint. So now it's
Yeah.
probably going to drop even further. And again, I think the bigger problem is just again, Albuquerque is out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's
Mhm.
you're 6 hours from Denver, you're 8 hours from Phoenix, you're 10 hours from Dallas. At least Phoenix and Denver and Dallas, all those cities can offer a major league franchise in some, or whether it's baseball, whether it's football, basketball, what have you. They've got something there. In Albuquerque, it's the Lobos, and that's it. Really,
Yeah.
it's Lobo basketball, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of makes summers hard because now all you and I have to look forward to is the rodeo to Santa Fe, which is
Oh yeah, yeah. Aren't we are so see that big smile? Yeah, it's
yeah. I think
awesome. It's great.
I'm starting to get sick. I might feel a cold coming on in the next week and a half. We're gonna have to
Yeah, I
get
think our
somebody.
producer's gonna have to fill in for us next week to talk all about the rodeo.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get Matt
Maybe
Dulcich.
even bring in a couple of rodeo clowns and everything to talk.
Yeah, that's and it used to be fun to go cover the rodeo because you had access to some of these
Yeah.
performers and it just got really strict. And then James would Rowan write all these stories about how they're stealing water, and then they got shut out for
Oh,
the
yeah,
long.
yeah, that was my story, right?
You made the rodeo a difficult thing for us, but that's why we try to drag it out with the high school stuff. And I know we've got something building later this week about all the coaching vacancies with high school sports,
Mhm.
and it's like this summer is this avalanche of job openings. And you and I have both written about the situation at Robertson. Of course, you write anything negative about Robertson, everyone comes out of the woodwork to try to offer their 2 cents.
Yeah,
But yet, when
exactly.
there's a controversy, say the basketball coach does something inappropriate with a young teenage girl, no one wants to say anything. But if you
Mhm.
write one negative thing about the administration, every administrator in Las Vegas comes out saying, "Oh, you should have contacted me." Well, yeah, where were you? Where were you when everything else was happening? So you can't pick and choose your arguments there. But yeah, a lot of coaching vacancies this summer. What are the ones that really jump out at you for whatever's out there?
Well, right now, I mean, obviously the biggest one is going to be Robertson, just because they've been good for like the last 5 or 6 years, but it's a program that is kind of it's in a state of flux right now. I mean, they've already lost I mean, they're losing 3 or 4 really key players from their state championship team just from graduation. They've already graduated, but then they lose George Smith, who literally like a week after the season was over for basketball, he's at Sandia.
Yeah.
Rumor is that Nathan Gonzalez, the 6'4" post that they had, he's now living in the Albuquerque metro area, and so he's probably not going to be back. You lose 2 key pieces like that, and really you've got a kid like Michael Marr, he's a bit undersized as a guard, and he's a good shooter, but you don't really have a lot of talent there. I mean, they're not going to be bad, but they're not going to be the team that's going to be challenging St. Mike's.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the most attractive job out there. Off the top, other than that, I mean, there really isn't much there really isn't much out there as far as just, big attractive jobs, at least from the basketball standpoint. And then, you got to flip over to football because, again, we go back to Robertson because they opened up all the positions and Leroy Gonzalez is not going to be coming back. So you lose a guy that's when you 2, 3 state championships and was a part of like 2 others when he was an assistant there under Chad Ronhouse back in the mid 2000s. The conventional wisdom is that Lucas Sanchez is going to take over that job, his offensive coordinator. So you assume that job's is going to be closed or is going to be over with here pretty soon. So after that, I mean, there's a couple of places, but really it's you're looking at Penasco. That's really about it.
Santa Fe Prep is they've not hired a boys basketball coach, have
No,
they?
they did. They immediately gave the job from Joe Vigil to one of his assistants.
Okay.
The name's escaping me, but they've already filled that position. I
Yeah,
think about the only other one in the city is I want to say Monte del Sol. I think their girls basketball position might still be open, but other than that, yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to see if at any point ATC or Santa Fe Prep can make that leap to become more competitive in those districts because their numbers, the student enrollment numbers are comparable to what St. Mike's has. I know their graduating class was within a few kids of what St. Mike's had, so it's not like you're fighting from behind. It's just it literally comes down to culture at some of these schools. The
It
culture
does.
at St. Mike's is different.
Well, Prep was, I think, what had the best opportunity because Joe had been there for a while. He'd kind of developed that culture, and he
Mhm.
had some good young kids coming up. But now that he's gone, I'm not sure where that program is. ATC, it's a bit of a rebuilding project because they lost a lot of kids. I mean, they lost a lot of seniors from that team that won the state championship,
Mhm.
and Joe Rayania, the head coach there, I think he ended up with like 7 or 8 kids on his varsity, and he was having to you know, uh, use some of his JV players just to give himself a couple extra bodies. But even then, you're limited because you only have 4 quarters per day that you can use, or I'm sorry, 5 quarters technically. And if you use 3 in one game, well, you can only use them for like 2 in another. So you're limited as far as what you can do with those sub varsity players. I think there's a potential there that they could improve. It's just simply a matter of if he can get those numbers up. If he does that, they'll be all right. Prep, I don't know. I think getting rid of a guy like Joe Vigil just kind of tells me everything you need to know about Santa Fe Prep, and that is they don't really care about winning.
Yeah.
They don't really care about being competitive.
Mhm. No, I'd agree with that. The girls' basketball position, Annika did such a fantastic job just trying to hold things together. But
Yeah.
I mean, you could walk down the hallways of Santa Fe Prep, and there was the best athletes at the school just had no interest in playing basketball just because it
No,
wasn't
they don't.
a thing. And look, it, anyone who knows anyone associated with Santa Fe Prep, and you and I do, is it's an academic school.
Mhm.
Athletics comes second, and if being on the floor practicing every night and doing those long road trips and getting your head caved in just doesn't appeal to you, you're not going to go out there and play. That's just the way it is because the future for those kids is athletics or academics, not
Exactly.
athletics.
Yeah, it definitely is
So,
academics.
yeah, and
And, and
so
and then when you look at how strong girls basketball has been on that side, I mean,
mhm,
not to take anything away from the boys side, because the district has won the last 4 state championships now,
right,
or 3 of the last 4, I should say. They've the girls side is equally as competitive when you look at Indian School, St. Mike's, and Robertson and West. I mean, all 4 of those teams are really tough. And one of the things in talking with a lot of coaches was that you didn't have an easy game out of that because Santa Fe Prep wasn't playing in that district and they lost Raton and they bring up ATC and ATC might be the one the 2 games in the during the year where every the other 3 schools or 4 schools kind of how you can probably get away with getting your starters on the bench in the
right.
second half and not having it affect you. Whereas on the other side, I mean, it was a dogfight night in and night out. Even ETC and Santa Fe Prep, they were capable of giving you, 2 or 3 really tough quarters where you had to battle a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I know last week's amazing interview with Andrew Dunn prevented us from touching on our athletes of the year, which had run a couple of days before that unforgettable performance by the Pecos League president. But the athletes of the year, Soren Annon was the male athlete from St. Mike's. Of course, the senior is graduating, going to Colorado State to run track. And then you did the female profile, and look, two amazing kids that just really stood out. I think in a lot of ways, the girls thing was a little bit harder to decide. It came down to 2 kids, but Soren was like
Far and away.
Yeah, far and away the one for the male athlete of the year. And we can talk about him first, but this is the guy who excelled at football, and the majority of the top half of my story talked about the one play that I think everyone's going to remember for a long time is that 4th down and 12 call in the final minute of the state championship game at Ivanhoe Stadium on November 30th, where your entire season's on the line. You've worked hard all year to get to that point. You're the undefeated team that everyone's been looking at all year. You're the defending state champion, and your 4th and 12 play to save everything is a screen pass that goes 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Someone catches it, makes the play, gets all the way down to the 6. They score the game-winning touchdown, win the championship afterwards. But in the course of interviewing him, I found out that the kid is just an amazing artist, exceptional at school. He plans to study physics in college because the influence he had from a teacher at St. Mike's. And so this is a kid who has his head on pretty straight and very, very focused, driven individual where, he put on a ton of weight, and now he's built like a Division I type athlete. So I came away very impressed by him.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me with Alexis, just such a soft-spoken person in general. I mean, she's one that really doesn't, seek the limelight, and really none of her family does too. They're all fairly laid back, but they're awful competitive, and it kind of showed. I mean, she's I haven't seen yet if the New Mexico High School Coaches Association has released their all-state softball team, but if Alexis makes that'll make 13 first or second team selections out of 4 sports for her. I mean, she clearly was, the best athlete, I think, in northern New Mexico, probably during that 5-year period. And that's, in all honesty, I mean, Rayleigh Hunt, great athlete in her own right, and obviously going to go to Duke and do really well there as a swimmer and everything. But when you can be a first team selection in 3 sports, I mean, boy,
Yeah.
you've got to be really good. And then, in volleyball, she was a first teamer as an outside hitter and a second team selection as a defensive player. So, there's only one other girl, I think, in 3A that did that, where they were selected twice or 2 different positions, which kind of shows you her versatility. And, it was truly remarkable to kind of see her play and perform. It would have been nice to see her get at least one more state championship. It was unfortunate the last 3 or 4 minutes of that 3A girls championship game against Navajo Prep, where they just, they couldn't buy a basket. Navajo Prep tightened up their defense and did a great job of defending, Alexis and making sure she didn't get the ball a lot and in spots where she could do anything. But, I mean, she clearly was the best athlete in northern New Mexico, and now she's heading off to Lubbock Christian to play for a Division II school in the Lone Star Conference. Which, I mean, we talk about the hierarchy in Division I. I mean, the Lone Star Conference from top to bottom is consistently one of the tougher Division II conferences in the nation, and she's going to be playing in that.
Yeah. What I told her mom when we informed the family that she had been selected as our female athlete of the year is I'll always remember the moments after the Class 3A girls basketball championship in the pit back in March. It's an emotional loss. It's an emotional moment. You're playing for the blue trophy for the first time in school history, and you come that close against a perennial powerhouse like Navajo Prep, which brings a ton of fans. That building it's an electric environment. But after the come down is when you're walking up that ramp and the realization that your senior season is over with and everything is done, and you came just short. But she has to immediately pivot and go right into the interview room and talk to people like us. And that's a tough moment for a teenage kid, for a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid to walk into, talking to media members with cameras and lights in your face,
Hmm.
people you've probably never even met, and they're asking you these very pointed questions. And while everyone else is falling apart, she was super composed. Just
Yeah.
everything she said was thoughtful and measured and respectful of the other team and her teammates and her coaches and the community. And that to me was really impressive, because you and I have been through countless interviews like that.
Oh yeah.
And you don't see that kind of composure a lot, which I think to me has showed a ton about her character too.
Yeah, absolutely. And she was like that even in softball. You play 3 games in one day, you're exhausted, your season's over. But she was very quick to kind of flip the script, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of admired that. That ability to just be able to just say, hey, we just didn't have it, we weren't able to do it, and but she gave it everything that she had on out in the field, and boy, man, I mean, her uniform by the end of that day, I mean, it was more red than it was white, because of how hard she was playing. And that's something I always take away from at least a state softball tournament.
Yeah, I love that though. When my kids would come home dirty from playing sports, that
Yeah,
was
they busted their butts,
oh
didn't they?
yeah. You learn all the secrets to get all the dirt out of the uniforms. You go straight to a car wash with a power washer, and it's a lot of vinegar and baking soda and stuff like that. It was that I always those are the things I'm going to miss from high school. Being a high school sports parent is like getting those uniforms clean, get
You
that
believe it?
that stench out of the armpit holes and stuff. It was
Maybe we should have an episode where you just kind of do that. You have
yeah.
uniform washing 101.
Well,
We should take that to a car wash and just start there.
you remember one of my first things I did with when I started at the New Mexican is I pestered the Isotopes about letting me be the bat boy for a day.
That's right. Yeah,
And I
you
went
did.
down there. I was on a getaway day. I was the bat boy for the Isotopes, and I was getting heckled from the stands. Like, "What does this bring your dad to work day and stuff?" And like, old man bat boy. But the amount of work that goes into actually being a bat boy and a clubhouse guy for the
Pretty
Isotopes.
remarkable.
Oh, you're getting there at 6 a.m. for a getaway game, and you're lining up all the uniforms. You got to shine the shoes. You got to put everyone's locker together. You have to get the food. You have to make sure the umpires have what they need. There's a giant humidor. You got to make sure all that stuff's in place. And then
Hmm.
afterwards, you're gathering everyone's cleats. You're scraping them off. The laundry, all the secrets I had. There's that spray foam toilet cleaner stuff that I would never
Really?
associate with laundry. That's like the miracle drug for the laundry room is they would spray the stuff and it'd get like these barbecue brushes and wire. It was like, wow, this is
Little league parents, take note.
yeah. There's a lot of work behind. It's like, man, you bat boys and the clubhouse guys are just. I don't even know how much they get paid, but I don't. That's a lot of work.
That is. I know
Those are
that
costly.
definitely is. And
Yeah.
people just think you're just there to hand out bats.
No, I know. And then the fans never left me alone too. They were asking for baseballs, and they said, under no circumstances are you to hand anyone a baseball. So of
Mhm.
course, there's a little kid who comes up next to the dugout. I was like, "Can I have a baseball, please?" I just handed him a baseball, and it was like going to the fish hatchery in Pecos and throwing food in there, and all of a sudden, all these
And
fish come.
everybody's all over you,
It
right?
was and even the clubhouse guy who was at the other end of the dugout, he just looks at me, he's like, what are you
What
doing?
are
I
you
told you
doing?
not to do that. It's like, I know, but she was like this big, and she's asking. The baseball was like as big as her face. Like, what am I gonna do? So yeah, that's what we should do. We should
Way
find
to
the
break the
battle.
rules there, Will. That's why you're in sport. That's why you're a sports writer and not a pitching coach or a
That's
hitting coach.
right. Oh man, if I were a professional athlete, I would hear everybody. If I were in the on deck circle, because I didn't realize this either, but the batters, the fans are nonstop talking to him.
Mhm.
And the on deck circle is right there by the box seats, and everyone in that within a 50-foot radius is talking to this guy. Like, I don't know how they do it. I don't know if they put earplugs in or what, or they're just tone deaf. They've mastered it, but I would hear everything.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
You'd be bantering back and forth even all the way up to the batter's box.
Yeah, my son was the bad boy for the Fuego one time, and no one talked to him. So that's complete opposite. You go see, we're going to bring this full circle. Go right back to the Fuego. When he's at the Fuego game, not a single person talked to him the whole time. So there you go.
You never say anything nice about the Fuego.
No,
Yvonne's heart is breaking right now as we speak. And she doesn't
well,
know why.
I know it starts with the uniforms too. They should have never switched to. I've had this acrimonious relationship with the Fuego ever since they
Ever since they
switched.
brought in the turquoise, right? Hey,
Turquoise brings out the
haven't
worst in
they
me.
haven't won since they went to turquoise.
No, yeah, I know. They're what I think I did a thing on it where they're 80 games under 500 since they
Mm-hmm.
switched to turquoise. So they just you're messing with karma. And see,
Yeah.
we could have asked Andrew Dunn that last week had he not boarded an airplane when he's coming on a podcast with us.
I just want to know what did they serve on that flight?
It better be good because it
I hope
was.
so.
It was worth it to have him on there for the 94 seconds that he was there.
Yeah, yeah. Something like that.
Yeah,
People are still talking about it, so
yeah. Well, that'll do it for this week. We survived a podcast without
sure.
a guest. I'm going to leave finding a guest up to James Barron for next week. Maybe we get like a rodeo clown to come in and join us.
Oh heck no, I'm not even messing with the rodeo. Hey, you want to bring Jim Butler in here so that way he can get mad at us for stuff that we did 20 years ago?
The first thing I'll do is say, hey, remember that story James wrote about you guys stealing water? Let's talk
It
about
wasn't
that
even me, man. It was Chacon.
for
Way to throw me under the
yeah,
bus, bro.
it's all James Barron's fault.
Yeah,
That's why the New
of
Mexico
course.
Sports Department.
Never mind the fact that they got mad at you for getting all the ticket prices wrong.
Yeah, you walk into the rodeo to Santa Fe grounds. They have all the nice signage, but they have our sign. They have our pictures like right next to the entrance. Do not let these two idiots in here.
Yeah,
They're killing us. So
and yet they do every single year.
cancel culture got us banned from the rodeo.
I
So
know. Who would have
sorry
thought
about
that at
that.
at a cowboy event?
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, that'll do it for this week. You can always look if you guys have any story ideas about the Fuego, definitely send them all to James, and then we'll go
No,
from there.
I'm forwarding them to you then.
And we will see you next week.